What if, on the night of July 3rd, 1973, Mick Ronson had walked off the stage at the Hammersmith Odeon and told David Bowie, "If you end this band, you're on your own"? Well, we will never know, because that didn't happen. Here's his story. Michael Ronson was born on May 26, 1946, in Kingston upon Hull. It's a port city on the northeast coast of England that the rest of the country had a tendency to overlook. Hull was industrial, working class, and a long way from London in every sense that mattered. It was not the kind of place that produced rock stars, or so people thought. Ronson grew up in a household where music was taken seriously from the beginning. His parents pushed classical training, and by the time he was a teenager, he could play piano, recorder, violin, and harmonium. He initially wanted to be a cellist. What changed his mind was Duane Eddy, the American guitarist, whose deep, twanging, bass string sound reminded the young Ronson of the cello he loved, but plugged in and electrified and alive in a completely different way. That moment of recognition, a classical instinct, finding a rock and roll channel, would define everything that came after. It explained why, even at his most ferocious on stage, Ronson's playing always had melody at its center. He didn't shred. He sang through the guitar. He joined his first band, the Mariners, in 1963 when he was 17. Over the following years, he played in a series of Hull bands, the Crestas, the Rats, building a reputation as the best guitarist in a city that nobody outside that city was paying attention to. He worked odd jobs to survive: car mechanic, warehouse hand, and eventually a gardener for a Hull City Council, marking out rugby pitches and tending parks. The job paid enough to keep him going. The music was where he actually lived. In early 1970, a musician named John Cambridge came back to Hull looking for Ronson. Cambridge had been playing with a struggling London singer-songwriter named David Bowie, a man with 2 minor novelty hits behind him and no obvious trajectory toward greatness. Bowie needed a guitarist. Cambridge knew exactly where to find one. He found Ronson marking out a rugby pitch. Within 2 days of their introduction, Ronson had learned enough of Bowie's material to perform live with him on a John Peel radio session. That speed of absorption, hearing a set of songs and simply knowing instinctively what to play and how to play it, was characteristic of the way Ronson worked. He did not overthink. He felt his way through music the way other people feel their way through conversations, naturally and without apparent effort. What Ronson brought to Bowie was not just guitar playing, it was architecture. He was classically trained, which meant he could write string arrangements, and the string arrangement he built. Around Life on Mars on the 1971 album Hunky Dory remains one of the most gorgeous pieces of orchestration in the entire rock canon.
But the film is a saddening bore, 'cause I wrote it 10 times or more.
He was also, visually and temperamentally, the perfect foil. Where Bowie was theatrical and alien and perpetually restless, Ronson was grounded, almost shy, the still center of the storm. A municipal gardener from Hull in silver platform boots playing like a man possessed. Bowie was the spectacle. Ronson was the spine.
Well, it could have been me. Yes, it could have been me. What didn't I say? What didn't I say?
Between 1971 and 1973, Mick Ronson and David Bowie made some of the most important albums in rock history. Hunky Dory, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust, and The Spiders from Mars, Aladdin Sane. Together, they co-produced Lou Reed's Transformer in 1972, and the string arrangement Ronson wrote for Walk on the Wild Side is so precisely right that it is almost impossible to imagine the song without it. A 1974 Cream magazine readers poll ranked Ronson the second best guitarist in the world, placing him behind only Jimmy Page and ahead of Eric Clapton. His guitar tone was built around a 1968 Gibson Les Paul Custom Black Beauty, run through Marshall 200 amplifiers he nicknamed the Pig, with a MKI tone bender fuzz pedal pushing the front end. The result was a sound that was simultaneously heavy and melodic, thick and full in the low end, singing and lyrical in the upper registers. It didn't bludgeon. It soared, and it was absolutely inseparable from the music it sat inside. You cannot hear Suffragette City or Moonage Daydream without hearing Ronson's guitar as the emotional spine of the whole thing. Life. The Spiders from Mars were one of the great rock bands of the era. Ronson was not simply a sideman on that stage. He was a co-star, playing guitar with his teeth, dropping to his knees in the spotlights, wearing the silver and white satin costumes with the same unself-conscious commitment that Bowie wore his alien alter egos. Producer Tony Visconti later said plainly, "If it wasn't for Mick, there might have been no Ziggy Stardust." That was not a polite tribute. It was a statement of fact backed up by every album they made together. And yet, for all the recognition he was receiving, Ronson remained remarkably unchanged by it. He was not a man who moved to a bigger house, hired an entourage, or started behaving like a star. People who knew him from Hull said he was exactly the same person he had always been. Quiet, generous, more interested in the next session than in the last headline. That quality made him beloved by everyone he worked with. It also made him dangerously easy to take for granted. On July 3rd, 1973, David Bowie walked to the microphone at the Hammersmith Odeon in London after what had been one of the best shows the Spiders had ever played. The room was full, the night had been electric, and Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart, and Ringo Starr were all watching from the wings. Then Bowie said, "Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do."
Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do. Thank you.
Ronson had been told in advance. The bassist, Trevor Bolder, and drummer Mick Woodmansey had not. They found out with the rest of the audience. The Spiders from Mars, the band Ronson had built alongside Bowie, the unit that had created 3 defining albums in 3 years, were over. Not winding down, not going on hiatus. Over. That night, in front of a packed house and a handful of rock and roll royalty, Bowie killed the thing they had made together and then moved on. Bowie's management immediately began positioning Ronson as a solo star. His debut album, Slaughter on 10th Avenue, was released in 1974 and reached number 9 in the UK. On paper, a promising start. In practice, it revealed a problem that would define the rest of his career. Ronson was brilliant at serving music, but deeply uncomfortable at being its center. He was a collaborator by nature, a man whose gifts only fully emerged when they were in conversation with someone else's vision. Marketed as a teen heartthrob and pushed into a spotlight he had never asked for, he struggled to find his footing. He was also not given time. His label wanted the next single, the next tour, the next thing. The deliberate architecture-first approach that had made the Bowie records so remarkable needed space to breathe. The machinery of the solo star system gave him none. The second solo album, Play Don't Worry, sold less well. Bowie, now deep into his cocaine-fueled Berlin reinvention period, publicly dismissed the Ziggy era and, by implication, the man who had helped create it. In a 1976 interview, Bowie said of Ronson, "Since then, poor Mick has completely missed his vocation. From his faulty solo career right on down." The cruelty of that sentence from the man Ronson had made a legend was something those close to him said he never entirely got over. Ronson retreated into the role he was genuinely suited to, the finest sideman and collaborator in rock. He toured with Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Revue in 1975. He became the long-term musical partner of Ian Hunter, playing on albums that were critically celebrated and commercially modest. He produced Morrissey's Your Arsenal in 1992, bringing the same melodic instinct and arrangement skill to a record that became one of Morrissey's most acclaimed. He helped John Mellencamp shape Jack and Diane into the song it became. He contributed a ferocious slide solo to the Wild Hearts, one of his final recordings, delivered with the same precision and fire as anything he had played for Bowie 2 decades earlier. He was everywhere, and, in the way the music industry tends to treat people who make others great without seeking credit, he was paid and recognized accordingly, which is to say not nearly enough. In April 1992, Ronson appeared at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley Stadium before 72,000 people. He played all the young dudes and heroes alongside Bowie and Ian Hunter. It was the last time he and Bowie would share a stage. He was already ill. Liver cancer had been diagnosed and the treatment was not working. He spent his final months completing a solo album, Heaven and Hell, which he knew he would not live to see released. When he could no longer finish the vocals himself, Bowie, Ian Hunter, John Mellencamp, and Joe Elliott of Def Leppard came in to complete the record. Those four men, each of whom owed a meaningful part of their career to what Ronson had given them, were the ones who carried the last album home. It was released posthumously in 1994. On April 29th, 1993, Mick Ronson died at the age of 46. After his death, Bowie appeared on the Arsenio Hall show and said, "Of all the early 70s guitar players, Mick was probably one of the most influential and profound, and I miss him a lot. Warm words."
Influential and profound, and I miss him a lot.
The question of whether Bowie had done right by the man who built the sound those words were honoring is one that Ronson's friends and bandmates have been answering quietly ever since. Randy Rhoads, one of the most celebrated metal guitarists of the 1980s, lifted Ronson's image and his Les Paul into Marshall tone almost wholesale and carried it into a new generation. Rolling Stone ranked Ronson the 41st greatest guitarist of all time in 2012. In Hull, a memorial stage bears his name in Queen's Gardens, and the park where he once worked as a council gardener has been renamed the Michael Ronson Garden of Reflection. There is something in that last detail that contains the whole story. The greatest guitarist Britain produced between Clapton and Beck, and a man who arranged strings for Bowie, played guitar for Dylan, and produced Morrissey, is remembered in his hometown by the park where he used to mark out rugby pitches before anyone in London knew his name. He never stopped being that person. He just briefly, brilliantly, became so much more. Mick Ronson built one of the most iconic sounds in rock history, and then spent the rest of his life giving that gift to other people's careers. He never chased the spotlight. He just kept playing. For Bowie, for Dylan, for Hunter, for anyone who needed what he had. The music has outlasted the credit, which is usually how it goes with the generous ones. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment and subscribe for more.
A lot of space, so if you don't like my face, now without my telephone.
But the film is a saddening bore, 'cause I wrote it 10 times or more.
It could have been me, yes it could have been me. What didn't I say? What didn't I say?
Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do. Thank you.